is, whoops, hold on one second. 22 SC 185080, State versus Tawanna Stillwell. Ms. Stillwell is charged with murder and felony murder and aggravated assault in connection with the shooting death of, is it pronounced Keane? Keane O'Kelley in November of 2020. If I could have entry of appearance for both sides representing the state we have.
ADA Maria Washington.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Washington. And on behalf of Ms. Stillwell.
Kevin Marks, Your Honor.
Mr. Marks, thank you for being here. Mr. Marks, I received from Ms. Nelson earlier today a collection of documents. I'm going to call them reference letters or letters of support of Ms. Stillwell. So I've reviewed those. You got those to Ms. Willingham, so the state has them. So I've looked at those, and you're free to refer to them. Just know I've read them.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
We can have folks be in the courtroom wherever. Sometimes the prosecutor's up at the witness stand. If we do that, then Ms. Stillwell and Mr. Marks should be at the podium, but it's also fine for you to be right where you are. The key is to be near microphones because Ms. Rivers, my court reporter, is handling this remotely today. And so she'll need people near microphones. Do you have a preference, Ms. Washington?
No, Your Honor, I'm fine right here if that's
okay. Why don't we do that? Why don't we have you stay right there? And what I will do to make it easier for Ms. Rivers is spotlight the folks who will be doing the talking. Ms. Stillwell, what's going to happen in a moment is that Ms. Washington is going to put you under oath. Once you're under oath, you'll need to answer her questions and mine truthfully and completely. Most of the questions are going to be very procedural about your rights as a criminal defendant and the fact that you're waiving them by going forward with a plea. But some of them may be about how you're doing right now in terms of processing things to make sure that this is what we call a knowing plea, meaning you're understanding everything that's being discussed. If at any point during the conversation we have, you need to take some time to talk to Mr. Marks privately, or you're not following what someone just said because it's different from what Mr. Marks said was going to happen. Will you tell him or tell me so we can work through that?
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. And when you're answering questions, if you'll bend that microphone towards you, there we go. I need you to speak into that microphone.
Yes.
All right, when you're ready, Ms. Washington.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Stillwell, can you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you will provide to the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You can lower your hand. Can you please state your name, age, and date of birth?
Tawanna Juana Stillwell, 5576.
And how old are you?
47.
Are you now under the influence of any medicine, drugs, or alcohol?
No.
How far did you go in school?
I took a lot of technical college thing from Atlanta Tech and different other classes and courses.
You graduated high school and have taken some college level or vocational level training?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Can you read, write, and understand the English language?
Yes.
Have you had an opportunity to review the document that charges you in the case today?
Yes.
Do you fully understand the nature of the charges pending against you?
Yes.
Do you understand that by pleading guilty today that you're giving up the following rights? The right to a trial by jury, the right to be presumed innocent, the right to confront any witnesses that may testify against you, the right to subpoena any witnesses for your defense, the right to testify yourself and to offer any other evidence in your defense, the right to have an attorney to assist you throughout the trial proceedings, and the right to not incriminate yourself.
Yes.
Do you understand that if you were to plead not guilty or remain silent and enter no plea at all, the state would be required to have a trial on these charges by jury?
Yes.
Do you understand that you're pleading guilty today to the following charge in indictment 22 SC 185080, count 1, murder, which is being reduced to voluntary manslaughter with the range of punishment of 1 to 20 years?
Yes.
Okay. And for the record, counts 2, 3, and 4 are being non-prossed or dismissed by the state.
Yes.
Ms. Stillwell, are you on probation or parole for anything, anywhere?
No.
This isn't a non-negotiated plea. And do you understand that the court may sentence you to any sentence that is authorized by law?
Yes.
Should the court sentence include a period of probation, you will be required to obey both the general and special conditions of probation. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Are you entering your plea of guilty today with everything that we have talked about so far?
Yes.
And has anyone used any force, threats, or promises which will cause you to plead guilty against your will?
No.
Do you have any questions for your attorney before we proceed?
No.
Understanding all of your rights, how do you wish to enter a plea to this charge today? And that's for a reduced charge for count 1 to voluntary manslaughter.
Yes.
So the question is, how do you plead?
Okay.
You plead
Oh,
guilty
guilty.
or not guilty or guilty?
And is your decision to plead guilty made freely and voluntarily?
I'm sorry, I didn't get a response to that question.
Sure. Let's go back to the critical question.
Yes.
If you'll ask that again.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Stillwell, understanding all of your rights, how do you wish to enter a plea to the charge today? And that's for count 1, a reduced charge to voluntary manslaughter.
Guilty.
And is your decision to plead guilty made freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
And did you in fact commit the offense to which you're pleading guilty to?
Yes.
Ms. Stillwell, are you a United States citizen?
Yes.
If you wish to challenge this plea for legal error, you'll have 1 of 2 ways to do so, and your attorney can further explain how each way works. The first is through a direct appeal, and you'll have 30 days from the date the sentence is entered to file this appeal. The second way is through a habeas corpus petition, and you'll have 4 years from the date the sentence is entered to file this petition. And Your Honor, just a brief summary of the facts and the state's recommendation. The state is recommending overall for the reduced count to voluntary manslaughter, 20 years with 10 years to serve, with the balance to be served on probation. A brief summary of the facts are that on November the 2nd of 2020, the defendant, Ms. Tawanna Stillwell, went over to Keane O'Kelley's home located at 1273 Lynway, Lynway Lane in Atlanta, Georgia, Fulton County, after being invited over there for dinner. The home was previously shared by Ms. Stillwell and Mr. O'Kelley as they were still married. Around 11:02 p.m., Ms. Stillwell called 911 and requested that someone come to the home to assist her in getting her things. At 11:28 p.m., Mr. O'Kelley called 911 and stated that Ms. Stillwell is still there on some, quote, drunk SHIT, end quote. He informed that they have already received a call and are sending someone out. At 12:01 a.m. on November 3rd of 2020, LaMarchelle, LeMarchell Davis, called 911 stating that a woman was knocking on his door, stating that she shot someone. Officers arrived on scene and Ms. Stillwell was outside of the home. She told officers that her husband had been shot and took the officers inside. She repeatedly told officers that he was beating on her as she proceeded to move erratically throughout the home. Officer Reyes called out to Stillwell and asked her for the gun, at which time she said, "It's right here. Let me see," while she pointed and walked to the kitchen. She then went outside where she proceeded towards her car. Officer Reyes stopped her as she reached into the driver's side door. At that time, the defendant was placed into custody. When Officer Reyes began to walk back to Stillwell's car to retrieve the gun, she stated that Mr. O'Kelley had drugs in the house and that he pulled a machine gun on her that he just went and hid. Stillwell was Mirandized and told investigator Bacon that she had been staying at another location due to recent domestic violence issues with Mr. O'Kelley and that he invited her over for dinner that night, but that they got into an argument. She said that she tried to get her belongings, but that O'Kelley began beating her in the head with his fist. When investigator Bacon asked her to explain what happened next, she stated that's when O'Kelley wouldn't let her leave out the house and then stated, quote, "You know what happened." Stillwell then asked to speak with a lawyer. Your Honor, in regards to the issues of this case, there is a history of domestic violence with the defendant listed as a victim in a 2016 battery case. There was another incident in May of 2020 in which Mr. O'Kelley slammed Ms. Stillwell up against a wall at her birthday party and began strangling her. He did not release her until others intervened into the altercation. ADA Willingham attempted to contact those witnesses, and she anticipated that those witnesses would testify as prior difficulty witnesses. Also, law enforcement officers did not do a search of the home to rule out whether or not a machine gun was actually involved by Mr. O'Kelley, and they anticipate that Ms. Stillwell will say that Mr. O'Kelley did have a gun and that he hit it prior to being shot. Further, ADA Willingham did meet with the ME in hopes of being able to combat what Ms. Stillwell said in reference to the victim hiding the gun and the drugs. And the ME stated that it was not possible for the victim, that it was not only possible for the victim to move around after being shot, that his blood loss would not have necessarily resulted in blood dripping on the floor, creating a trail. And speaking with the victim's mother, Ms. Willingham or ADA Willingham did recall that Ms. Stillwell, in reference to her going over to the defendant's home, she did have a conversation with her mother in between Ms. Stillwell calling 911 and Mr. O'Kelley calling 911, in which she told Ms. Stillwell that the victim had been watching football and that he was drunk. She stated that she told Ms. Stillwell that she should leave her things and go, at which time Ms. Stillwell told her mother that she was going to go inside and check on the victim, but based on the timeline, the victim was not yet shot at that time. The victim in this case, Mr. O'Kelley, died 5 days later at the hospital, but he was unable to provide a statement to law enforcement officers. Officers also did not speak with neighbors except for the 911 caller, who stated that he did not hear the gunshot, and shell casings were also not collected in this case. The biggest issue in this case would be the prior difficulties. We anticipate that the victim will state that she was defending herself. There was hair that belonged to the victim that was recovered and placed into evidence, but there is no account from the victim of what occurred. And with the prior difficulties, this is a strong voluntary manslaughter case. Based off of ADA Willingham's meeting with the ME, she was not able to confirm what position the victim was in compared to the defendant at the time the defendant was shot. Your Honor, we do have two witnesses here on behalf of Mr. O'Kelley. Mr. O'Kelley's grandmother, Miss Alberta Phipps, would like to address the court. And also we do have a statement written by his mother. His mother is present in the court, but it will be read by our victim advocate as well.
Okay, a couple questions before we get there.
Yes, Your Honor.
What did the medical examiner's report say about where the entry wound was? Was there an exit wound? All I was able to gather from what you shared is that it was one gunshot wound. It would not have bled a lot externally, but that's it.
Yes, Your Honor. So the victim was shot in his hip. And so the projectile showed that he was struck in his hip, and it was just one gunshot wound.
Okay. I understand that the medical examiner wasn't in a position to say, here's how Mr. O'Kelley must have been standing or sitting and how Ms. Stillwell would be, but was it a front to back to front? Did it go in the side? The hip isn't, other than telling me it wasn't his head or his foot.
Yes, Your Honor. So the direction of the projectile is backwards, downwards, and to the left. There was an exit wound on the left hip. No projectiles or fragments were recovered. But again, the direction of the projectile is backwards, downwards, and to the left hip.
Backwards meaning it entered the front part of his body and came out the back part of his body.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Going downwards.
All right, thank you. So we can do the next part however you'd like. The victim advocate can read Mr. O'Kelley's mother's statement, or Ms. Phipps can come to the microphone. Either way works for me.
Yes, Your Honor.
And she can sit at council table if that's easier. She just
Yes.
needs to be at a microphone so Ms. Rivers can hear her. Hello, Ms. Phipps. I'm going to ask you to pull your mask down if that's okay while you're talking, just so that way the court reporter will be better able to hear you. Are you okay with that?
Okay.
Great. Well, good afternoon. I'm sorry we're meeting in these circumstances, but I would like to hear what you want to share about your grandson.
I would like to share that on, I think it was November the 8th, I was so happened to have been watching television and a sign came on and said Grady Hospital. So that time the phone rang. I picked up the phone and said, hello. And they asked me to speak out of the press. I said, this is she speaking. So he said, I would like to what relation are you to Keane O'Kelley? I said, I am Keane O'Kelley's grandmother, and that is my only grandson. And I said, why? He said, he's been shot. I said, what? I said, been shot. So he said, yes, he's been shot. So he told me how to get down to Great Hospital, what area I could get to. I can't remember all that. But anyway, I went called my niece who does my driving for me. I said, Keon has been shot. I just got a call from Great Hospital. Somebody now there. So anyway, she rushed on over and we went down to the hospital and we found where he was. When I went in the room where he was laying with tubes and all in the bed and all over him, I just laid my hand on the bed and I started praying. So after a while he woke, he opened his eyes and he said, grandmother, he said, she brought this on. When he said she was talking about Tawanna. She brought this on all on herself. So I hadn't done anything to her. And I laid my hand on again and I started praying. He said, I had not done anything. She brought this all on herself. So I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed on at the hospital with him that evening and stayed on. So after a while, we went on home. My niece and I took me home. And I stayed all that night. I just couldn't sleep any. I just saw him in my sleep at all night because he's the only someone I have. I am 94 years old, soon to be 95, and Keon was the only somebody I had to help me in any way. If I couldn't stand up and cook and all, he would help me. So I wasn't able to sleep that night. I just prayed. So the next day, my niece came to pick me up. We went back down to see Keon. He was still lying there asleep when I walked in the room. So I still put my hand on the bed and I started praying. So he said, grandmother, so you don't have to try to come down here every day to see me. He said, you can ask, well, Keon, they had told me that he was scheduled for surgery on a Monday. So I said, well, Keon, the next day is Sunday. I stayed down all that Saturday. I said, I won't come down Sunday. I said, I'll just go to church and I'll be praying for you. He said, okay. I said, but hope to be down here Monday when you have surgery. So all that night, I just haven't been able to sleep in it because I just see that's the only help I had, my grandson. And just to see him saying that he said he hadn't done anything, it's just taken a toll on my whole life. I don't have anybody else to help me. That was the only grandchild I had was Keon. So on that time, we went down there. When we went down there, as last four stated, that Saturday I came on home. I prayed all night and also I had not planned to go as I was stated that Sunday. So the phone rang before day Sunday morning. And they told me to rush down, say, brother, rush down to Keon has taken a toll for the worst. And I just, oh, Jesus. So I called my niece to come and take me to the hospital. They have just got a call that Keon has taken for the worst and to rush down there. So she came over, my niece came over, Gloria came over, rushed me down there. And then I came in, I could just see him lying there. Again, he was unconscious immediately, just lying there with tubes all over everywhere now. So again, I laid my hand on the bed and started praying. He just lay there, We lay there, we sat there some time. And after a while, I heard a noise of something, and I looked to the right. And I didn't see, and I looked to see Keon, and I looked in his face, and he was closing his eyes. Oh, and the latest that he's gone, he's dead. I haven't been able to sleep a night since that happened. I haven't been able to function any in the daytime. It's just in chaos and confusion. That's the only somebody I had. And when he told me that she brought this all on herself, I have never in my life done anything to harm Tawanna in any way. I've tried to help her all my life and her daughter too. She can't say that I haven't done anything to hurt them. Why she killed my son, I don't know. He said she brought it all on herself. I don't know the consequences of this, but all I know, Jesus, that I don't have anyone else to help me. I don't have anyone to do anything for me, but I shall keep him in prayers, and I hope that I will see him again at the second coming of Christ. That's all I know. But what has between them, I haven't had a good night's sleep since Keon has been dead. I wake up at some point during the night, cried out to the Lord that looked like something would happen to him, something would be better. But it hasn't. Every day it's just chaos every night. But I still say, I hope to see him again at the second coming of Christ. But until then, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know.
Ms. Phipps, thank you for sharing those thoughts. I understand what you're going through. I've lost loved ones as well, and I'm sorry that you're feeling left alone. It sounds like you have a few folks who can still help you around, but not in the way that your grandson did. And that's a void in your life.
Yes, Lord, it never can be filled.
I would not have guessed that you're 94 going on 95. You're taking real good care of yourself. And I appreciate you giving me some insight into what the loss of Mr. O'Kelley has meant to others. We see these things and it's on paper and it doesn't have life behind it, but you're helping me understand a bit more how that loss has affected others and maybe even more importantly, what Mr. O'Kelley was to you, not just your only grandson, but the source of care and compassion in your life.
Yes, Lord.
Well, thank you for sharing. I know it's not easy to talk about this. I wish you a good night's sleep at some point.
I pray for that, but it hasn't come yet.
Take your time getting up.
I wanted to get over to the end of this. Where anybody has.
Oh, I see. And Your Honor, the state has one more statement that'll be read by Ms. Santos on behalf of Mr. O'Kelley's mother.
All right, Ms. Santos, if you would.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. And I'll be reading this on behalf of Ms. Vickie Brown.
Ms. Brown.
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Brown is here.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
All right. Hello, Ms. Brown.
Your Honor, I stand before this court today with a heavy heart, burdened by the tragedy that has shattered the lives of my family and me. I speak not only for myself, but also on the behalf of my beloved son, whose voice was silenced forever due to the reckless actions of the individual standing trial. It is crucial, Your Honor, that we recognize the significance of consequences in moments like these. My son's life was abruptly cut short, leaving behind a void that can never be filled. With each passing day, we are reminded of the immense pain of losing a cherished soul who cannot defend himself or share his side of his story. Impulsivity. While perhaps an explanation for the actions committed cannot justify the irreversible loss and devastation inflicted upon our family. We implore the court to consider the value of accountability and the necessity for the responsible party to face the consequences of their actions. By doing so, we hope to bring some semblance of justice for our son and prevent further harm to others who may fall victim to the impulsive decisions in the future. While we acknowledge that no sentence can fully mend the shattered pieces of our lives, we firmly believe that it is imperative to send a message to society about the importance of personal responsibility. Our hope is that this message will resonate not only with the individuals on trial, but also with others who may find themselves teetering on the edge of impulsive choices that could have devastating consequences. Your Honor, we place our trust in this honorable court to carefully consider the severity of the loss we have endured and to weigh it against the actions of the accused. We pray that the court's decision will reflect the gravity of the situation, reinforcing the notion that our society cannot tolerate actions that result in the loss of innocent lives. May justice be served not only for our son, but for the countless others who have suffered a similar fate. Let us not forget that behind every legal proceeding lies the profound impact on human lives, forever altered by the absence of a loved one. It is in their memory and in pursuit of the just society that we plead for a suitable sentence. Thank you, Your Honor, for the careful consideration and for allowing our voices to be heard in the solemn court of justice. Respectfully, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Ms. Washington, before I turn to Mr. Marks to hear from him and Ms. Stillwell and anyone from that side of this process, it sounds like the police didn't do a lot of follow-up investigation. You've mentioned that there was not a search of Mr. O'Kelley's residence, which I guess at one point was the O'Kelley Stillwell residence, but at this time was the O'Kelley residence, to see if there was another gun in the house. The gun that was recovered was in Ms. Stillwell's car?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And similarly, no search of Mr. O'Kelley's house to see if there were drugs in the house. Which provides context, isn't really what this is all about, but I was threatened with a machine gun. No way to verify that because no one looked for a machine gun.
Yes, Your Honor, correct.
Okay. Do you know from your review of the record whether Ms. Stillwell on November 3rd, when she was interacting with the police, had any evidence of injuries?
Your Honor, no injuries to the victim or to the defendant in this case are notated. At least on my recollection, I have not seen that where she had injuries to her. And that's not notated at all. I think that would be a red flag and would have been notated for today if there were injuries to her, but no were notated.
And by injuries, I mean visible, not a broken nose or
Right.
a black eye. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a physical altercation between Ms. Stillwell and Mr. O'Kelley, but the officers weren't describing a bloody lip or bruising or anything like that.
No, Your Honor, other than hair belonging to the victim that was recovered, but other than that, nothing in regards to the defendant. No injuries, no visible injuries, nothing of that nature.
Okay, hair belonging to the victim. Did Mr. O'Kelley have long hair?
Your Honor,
Braids or dreads or something at the time, or that's an odd thing to have recovered.
right. And it just says that there was hair that belongs to the victim that was recovered and placed into evidence.
Okay.
But however, due to, I guess, the police work that was done, there was no way of telling, and the defendant did not state how that hair was placed there.
Okay, or the police work that was not done. All right. Mr. Marks.
Your Honor, prior to my argument and recommendation, I'd like to call my witness, if I could go in that order.
You can go in any order you want.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll call Marilyn Dallas.
Oh, and before Ms. Dallas comes up, I should let both sides know, while you all were getting ready, I had pretrial services on the call didn't need them to wait all Friday afternoon. And so I asked the representative from pretrial services about Ms. Stillwell's criminal history, something else I should factor into all this. And I learned that Ms. Stillwell has no convictions. There was an arrest in 2006 in Clayton County for drugs, and those charges were dismissed. And then there's this case. So one other arrest and this matter. So you're welcome to weave that into your presentation, but I also got that from a neutral, unbiased source.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, you can call Ms. Dallas.
Your Honor, may I stand over here so that I can?
As long, well, what you need to do is be near a microphone. So you can stand at the podium. If Ms. Dallas is going to be testifying, she'll be using that microphone. Okay.
Do you swear affirm the testimony you give in the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth of God?
I do.
All right, put your hand down. Please state your name and spell it for the record.
Marilyn Dallas, Marilyn Dallas.
Ms. Dallas, how are you acquainted with Tawanna Stillwell?
She is my cousin.
How long have you known her?
All our lives, we grew up together.
So well over 30 years.
47.
Are you the same age or
Same.
same age? All right.
And do you currently reside in the metropolitan Atlanta area?
Stone Mountain.
Right. And have you done so for the last 20 years?
Yes.
And were you acquainted with Keane O'Kelley, the late husband of Tawanna Stillwell?
Through the marriage.
And did you have occasion to observe them interacting with each other?
Occasionally.
What was the frequency and occasion?
We get together periodically throughout the year, mostly during her birthday or either for one of her children to celebrate some occasion.
So it was primarily special events that you would have been
Yes.
in the presence of Mr. Kelly?
Or we had, she did a breast cancer event before this, a year before that, and then that was the second year.
How many children, how many kids does Ms. Stillwell have?
Or
Are any of the children with Mr. O'Kelley?
no,
Are they adult kids or minors?
last child just graduated.
Graduated high school?
Yes.
Okay.
You interacted with Tawanna more often than just special occasions, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall attending Tawanna's birthday party in 2020?
Yes.
Would that have been in May?
That was May, I think, 8th or 7th or something. It was that weekend of Mother's Day weekend.
And about how many people attended?
15 or more than 20.
And was Keane O'Kelley there?
Yes.
Tawanna was there?
Yes.
And what did you observe of the two of them throughout the evening?
Throughout the evening, mostly just Tawanna was socializing with everyone that was there. And Keane was socializing with just a couple people, but kind of standoffish a bit. But as far as those two together, occasionally a comment here and there between them, but I don't know what was said.
And then later on in the evening, did you observe an altercation?
Yeah, around about 2:30, maybe 3 in the morning. I just saw Keane putting his hands around Tawanna's neck. I don't know what the occasion or the reason behind it was. So I myself don't believe in violence like that. So I got in between them and pushed him off of her. And she went down to the floor and I was just saying, this is not happening on my watch. And at that time it was, the party is over. Let's wrap it up. Let's go home.
And what you observed was clearly violent, not playful.
No, it was not playful. His hand was clearly around her throat.
And when she hit the floor and you were approaching her, was she gasping for air?
She was more or less in shock because he put his hands on her for whatever the reason was.
And were you intoxicated at the time that you observed this?
No,
You were fully alert?
very.
Do you have any doubt as to what you observed?
No,
And so,
And just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just so I'm clear, it's not just that you observed it from across the room. You actually got between the two of them.
less than 5 feet away.
Okay, I mean, to get between the two of them, you were 0 feet away. Like you got them apart.
Yes.
And you said that that pretty much shut down the party?
Yeah, I pretty much let everyone know that I don't know what occurred, but the party is pretty much over now because that was an uncomfortable feeling for me.
And was Tawanna upset?
Very.
Did you ever have occasion to either observe or have reported to you other incidents of domestic violence between Tawanna and Keane?
Tawanna called me a few months prior, and I don't know if it was earlier that year or later in the prior year. And I want to say earlier that year of 2020, where she called me frantic. It was after 11 because I was asleep, stating that Keane had put a gun to her head. They was having an argument about some reason, and he put a gun to her head. And so I asked her if I needed to come and pick her up. She said no, she was going to be going to one of our other cousins' home for a while until she worked through that.
So it's your understanding that she actually left the home following that event?
Yes.
You've known her for 40 plus years. Do you know her to be a person who seeks attention or makes up stories?
I've never known Tawanna to make up a story that didn't have truth to it.
And based upon her tone in the call, did she sound like she was scared?
She was terrified. She didn't know if that would be her moment to die or not.
And you're saying that would have been in late 2019 or early 2020?
Correct.
Now, as far as Tawanna goes, what have you observed about her as a person, as a cousin, a friend, an employee, a mother? What have you observed of her throughout the community and in life?
Tawanna is a people person. She has no problems having conversations with individuals, stranger, or whether she knows them. It doesn't matter how they may feel about her. She still will have a conversation about them, but she is not an individual who likes conflict. She'll try and talk her way out of it first before she does anything to be in any kind of conflict.
Have you observed her or are you aware of any charity work that she does?
She has her own ministry that she was trying to start up, where it's a ministry to help homeless women, I believe, battered women, which is how we ended up, because she called me to assist her with the breast cancer that was done down in Forest Park in 2019 as well as in 2020.
And do you know if she's still involved with charity work?
Not as much as she would like to be.
Have you known her to generally be gainfully employed as an adult?
Always 2 or 3 jobs.
Are you acquainted with her daughter, Michaela?
That's my baby.
So what have you observed about Tawanna as a mother to Michaela, who's right now 17 years old, correct?
She has done a very good job. Michaela just graduated a year early. She will be attending college in the fall. She all 4 of her kids has graduated high school. 3 of them are boys, which is very difficult, especially for a single mother.
And as far as Michaela, she graduated high school early and she's headed off to Georgia Southern, is that right?
Correct.
And do you give credit to Tawanna and her efforts as a mother?
For assisting her along her way, of providing her for whatever she needed, as far as being able to give her that step that she needed to go forward in a fast way.
There was a period of time just shy of 7 months when Ms. Stillwell was incarcerated during this case. Did you have any interactions with Michaela during that period of
From time to time, I would call her to check in on her. I would see if she needed any financial assistance and send her some money if it was a need.
And so between you and other friends and family, were you able to provide a support system for her?
Yes.
And did you have occasion to communicate with Ms. Stillwell while she was incarcerated?
Occasionally, from time to time, I did have a conversation with her. And mostly it was about just trying to help her keep her head held up, unfortunate the situation.
And keeping her family together?
Yes.
Right. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the court about Ms. Stillwell and your observations of her in this lifelong relationship?
I do not have anything else at this moment other than Tawanna is not the picture that may be painted of her. She is a very nonviolent individual.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Ms. Washington, do you have any questions of Ms. Dallas?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Dallas, for being here. Appreciate it.
Your Honor, I would move that respondents exhibits 1 through 7 previously submitted be admitted into evidence.
So that's a statement from Ms. Hogue, Michaela, the daughter we just heard about,
Yes.
a letter from a Mr. Robinson, Des Robinson, Paulette Jackson, Val Martin, and then some other documentation.
Number 5 was Maya Williams.
Oh, did I skip over that?
Starts at the bottom of-
That's right. Yeah. Okay. See that?
And it's 2 other documents.
Yep. Okay. Ms. Washington, any objection to the admission for purposes of this plea hearing? Defendants exhibits 1 through 7.
No objection, Your Honor.
How do you want those to get into the record? We can use the digital version and Ms. Rivers can just attach those to her transcript.
That would be fine with me. I brought a hard copy, so whatever is easier.
Okay, why don't you leave a hard copy with me and I will leave that with Ms. Rivers and she can decide what's easier for her. Thanks. Okay, so 1 through 7 are in. Anything else?
No further evidence, just argument and recommendation, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm ready for that.
Your Honor, as you've heard, the facts in this matter are essentially undisputed. Tawanna Stillwell did fire a gun that struck her husband in the hip. 5 days later, he ultimately died.
And they were estranged but married at the time?
They were still married. She had moved out a few months prior. So on that evening, Ms. Stillwell was returning to the home. She had actually been invited earlier in the evening to have a spaghetti dinner. She didn't do the spaghetti dinner, but did show up and was going to remove some final belongings from the home that remained. Keon had been watching the Giants-Buccaneers game, Monday Night Football, had become intoxicated, was belligerent. Ms. Stillwell just wanted to get her items and leave the house where she previously lived with her daughter, Michaela, as well as Keon. He was interfering with her. He wouldn't let her get her items, which is why she had to call police. So the documented confrontation starts around 11 o'clock. She steps out, calls the police, says, "Can you please send somebody to get my stuff out of here so I can go home and be done with this situation? I'm getting concerned. Things are getting out of hand." So 11 o'clock is when the call is made. She makes several other calls. She calls Vickie Brown, Keon's mother, says he got drunk on vodka watching the football game. Can you knock some sense into him? Let him get my stuff so I can leave. I just want to leave. She calls his father, tells him, your son's a bad seed. He has pot and guns and he won't let me out. Can you talk some sense into him? 11:55 comes. A physical altercation commences. And
Hold on 1 second.
around 11:55, it gets physical. He's putting his hands on her, they're shoving. He hits her about the side of the head. She pushes off of him. He hits her several times on her head. Ultimately, she pulls the gun. She fires it in his direction at a downward trajectory. It strikes him in the hip. There's a clean exit wound. He goes down. She's hysterical. She goes outside. Doesn't know where her phone is at this point in time. She runs to a neighbor's house, bangs on the door. Nobody's there, or they don't answer. Goes to the next house, frantic, in a panic, bangs on the door. They open the door. She gets it through to them. Police, we need to call the police. They call the police. They make the report. This was at 11:59 p.m., November 2nd, 2020.
So I heard from Ms. Washington, maybe I misunderstood, that actually Mr. O'Kelley called 911 at some point
He
too,
called at
saying,
11:30.
could you get her out of here? She, meaning Ms. Stillwell, she's here. She needs to be gone.
Right.
I didn't hear you say that. Where does that fit into this chronology of
The
it is?
chronology is that While
He's drunk and belligerent, and so
Yes.
he calls to say,
he
could you
calls-
get her out of the house?
yes, he says, I believe he says, this bitch be acting crazy and want shit out of my house. And on the phone call, he sounds intoxicated, to be honest with you.
Okay.
The phone call takes about 45 seconds. I think it's about 15 seconds into the call before he speaks the first word. Anyway, a neighbor, so that's around 11:30, 11:59, neighbor calls. You can hear Tawanna screaming in the background hysterically. The police arrive 5 minutes later, 1:04 a.m. They approach her. She takes them in the house. She admits what happened right off the bat. She didn't try to conceal anything. The moment that this happened, her first instinct was, oh my God, what has happened here? I need to get the police here as soon as possible. The police, facing a gunshot victim, got there in 5 minutes. Unfortunately, they didn't get there an hour previously where none of this would have happened. So it was clearly a terrible mistake, a mistake that was admitted to. Ms. Stillwell said, on the spot, he was beating on me. I shot him. She admitted all of this in a hysterical bout. She shot him, and this was in the context of a 7-year toxic relationship fraught with domestic violence, substance abuse, disrespect, and also incongruities with respect to the power structure. It's about 10 years older than she was. And he was the one who controlled everything. He did whatever he wanted. As you've heard, going all the way back to 2016, we had documented domestic violence. 2016, and that was actually when Ms. Phipps, who we heard from, and I certainly sympathize for her loss tremendously. In 2016, it was actually Ms. Phipps who bonded out her nearly 50-year-old son for domestic violence charges. We've heard testimony about how wonderful Keane was, and I have no doubt that he had wonderful qualities to him. We know that in relationships involving domestic violence, most of the times are good. She wouldn't have stayed with him if it was 99% bad. So Ms. Stillwell, I'm sure in her statement, will talk about some of the good times that they had. But it was in substance abuse that led to bad times and violence.
You've referred to substance abuse a number of times.
Yes.
Is it that your understanding or your portrayal of this is that Mr. O'Kelley was a substance abuser, or that together Mr. O'Kelley and Ms. Stillwell abused substances?
Mr. O'Kelley,
All by himself?
primarily. Mr. O'Kelley primarily consumed alcohol and marijuana. Ms. Stillwell consumed some alcohol.
Okay. And on the night in question, when Ms. Stillwell somehow couldn't find her phone, even though she had it just before to call 911, had she been drinking?
She had not. And Your Honor, to clarify that point, I'm not saying that she lost her phone. She ran out of the house and was banging on doors because she was freaking out at the gravity of the situation.
And this gun that she used to shoot and ultimately kill Mr. O'Kelley, that was in her waistband, in a handbag. She can't find her phone. She can find a gun. She's carrying a gun because, and where on her?
Your Honor, she had already called the police and they hadn't responded. And she had.
But my question wasn't, had she called the police? What's your understanding of where the gun was on her?
I was packing up my car, so everything was in my car.
So she.
And my phone had went dead. That's why I had called. When I called the police, I called the police first. As I'm waiting, I called Miss Vickie. I have phone records for that. We pull phone records. Right after I called Miss Vickie, I called his dad. All my phone records states I called the police 911 2 times. Right after that, as I'm waiting for the police, I called Miss Vickie, and I spoke with her. And then was telling her, I was literally saying, Miss Vickie, I told you I didn't want to come over here because I knew the process. I actually wasn't going to go. And she said, just please go over there and talk to my son. Just y'all go and try and work it out and talk. That was the only reason why I went.
Okay. So the gun, you're going to need to help me understand if now I have a vision of it being somewhere in a box.
No, it was up under the seat. It's in the report. You can see, I put.
I don't
okay.
have the report.
Okay,
So
well, yeah,
referring
that's what
me
we
to
do.
a report. Is
Yeah, you can see the pictures. My whole car was, okay. All right.
Where was it in the moment before?
It was in the car. It was in the car under the seat. That's what it said. Yes, it was in the car under the seat. Huh? Oh.
Why did you bring it from the car?
I'm saying afterwards.
You put it, he's asking.
Oh, it was inside, it was in the house. All my stuff was in the house. Yes.
Okay.
I thought you was meaning afterwards.
She was
That's all right.
confused with respect to the time frame. The gun was in a box inside of the house with her other belongings that she was removing. After the shot was fired, she ran out of the house. She put the gun into the side pocket of the car, which is where it was recovered by police.
Okay, so let's go back to gun in box. I'm just trying to understand as best we are able to reconstruct it. And I appreciate we're getting only one side of the reconstruction, and it was a few years ago. But gun is in box, gun is not on person. So Ms. Stillwell, having been struck about the head or wherever it was that you're sharing with me, Mr. O'Kelley was allegedly hitting her, then instead of leaving, went over to a box, pulled out a gun and shot him.
No, that's not how it went.
Okay, I'd love to understand how it went. I'm not requiring you to call Ms. Stillwell. That's not the point here. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But I'm appreciating where you're going with this. I also understand the state's perspective on this. I obviously understand Ms. Phipps and Ms. Brown's perspective on this. They weren't there.
Right.
And they saw a side of, Ms. Stillwell saw a side of their son and grandson that they wouldn't have seen. I understand that. The essence to me of what we do here with a plea to voluntary manslaughter is what happened around the shooting. And right now, I'm not following how the gun got out of the box into Ms. Stillwell's hands, pointed at Mr. O'Kelley, a shot fired. I appreciate it's only one shot and it's front to back. Those are all favorable to, hey, things were just happening. But whether you want to talk with Ms. Stillwell and then you tell me, or you want to let her loose on this, I need to understand. I would like to understand.
I'd like to be precise with it.
Okay, why don't you guys talk for a sec?
Yeah, right. Like we in the kitchen. It was in the kitchen, and both of us, it was on the other side of the bed.
Where's the box?
And the box, the way the kitchen is right here, the kitchen like right there on the counter.
Mhm.
And so
The box is in the kitchen.
yeah, it's just a little
How
box
far
right
away from
there.
you?
It's like a step right there from the
A few
kitchen.
feet.
A few feet, and he was
What
trying to
room
get
was it in?
in the kitchen. Everybody was
Okay,
taking-
then don't you step away from the kitchen. It's in the kitchen, not a step away from the kitchen.
No, it's.
It's in the box in the kitchen.
And
He's
both of
saying
us, he's trying to reach
you
over,
reach
get it, and I'm
You reach,
trying to
you
reach it.
reach, you grab it. you shoot.
Yeah, 'cause he was trying to reach
On the
and
counter.
grab it. Yeah, and he was trying to reach and grab it too.
Oh, I don't totally understand. Your Honor, so the gun was in the box on the counter in the kitchen. The altercation was in the kitchen. He's hitting her in the head. She reaches and grabs the gun and shoots him.
Okay.
All right. So as I said, this was a toxic marriage. There were good times and bad. One of the good things that did come of it was the relative stability for 5 years of the marriage when the two of them lived together with their daughter, who again successfully completed high school, is on her way to college. But the bad times were the
When you
times.
say their daughter, I'm sure he helped co-parent, but he's not the
Not
biological.
the biological father. She treated, because her biological father is actually incarcerated pretty much since her birth. He was the only father that she knew.
Okay, and that's reflected in her letter,
Right.
that was someone very important in her life.
So the side of Keane that the family didn't see was the side that was behind closed doors mostly. What is very reflective of that were the statements that Keane made to his grandmother. She brought this all on herself. I haven't done anything. Never in my life have I done anything to hurt her. So if those were his words and they were his beliefs, in his view, strangling his wife at a birthday party in front of her friends and family, that's not doing anything. That's never in his life harming her. Strangulation is a serious thing in my book. So the fact that he would do that in a semi-public venue is telling as to what he was capable of behind closed doors. It also shows the extent to which he would have concealed this bad aspect of his life. Everyone conceals certain aspects of their life. It's human nature. So I have no doubt that there was the side of Keane that his family saw, the go to church with grandma Keane. But that is not the person that Tawanna Stillwell was dealing with on the night in question. She was dealing with years of conflict and an actual altercation. She fired the gun and shot him. She realizes after the fact that she shouldn't have done it. She should have just run out of the house. She should have run out of the house at 11 o'clock. She has thought so many times about all of the things that could have gone differently that in the heat of the moment, she didn't think of. And I'm sure she'll tell you about some of those. But it was a series of bad decisions in this heated exchange with a gun just a few feet away, and a life ended. And now we have another one, an individual who's facing the potential of a substantial amount of time in prison, and the life that she has known being drastically impacted. The people who know Tawanna Stillwell, who provided the letters, and just to highlight a few of the accolades, from Des Robinson, who's known her for a decade, diligent in her work and responsibilities, always willing to lend a helping hand, great work ethic. He saw her work in the community, feeding the homeless. She's someone who's looking to make a difference for her family and the community. I think that's been consistent. I think it's significant to note that Ms. Stillwell's charity work goes back to, it's documented from the testimony we heard today, back to 2019. This isn't stuff that she did in contemplation of a mitigation package for a sentencing hearing. This is legitimate. This is who she is. She's a charitable giving person. Paulette Jackson, who's known her for 20 years, great citizen who helps the homeless, breast cancer charity and the elderly, positive force in the community. Valerie Martin, known her for a decade, polite, hard worker, always willing to help, sensible, graceful person. Maya Williams, Tawanna inquires about breast cancer walk. This is in 2019. Maya Williams finds out that it was canceled. She and Tawanna organized the event together, and then again in 2020. She shows enthusiasm and concern for the community. And then I thought the most important statement was from her daughter, who had reached out to me because she wanted to make a statement to the court, but she did not believe that she could bring herself to be placed on the witness stand in court here today. And in that letter, you get what you would expect from a child, love for a mother, but I think you get exceptional candor as well, in that in the immediate aftermath of this incident, she was very upset with her mother. She blamed her for basically shattering the family that they had together. This is a girl who, for the first time in a while, had years and years of continuity. She wasn't going from different houses, and this was all shattered. But in the time since, she has learned to forgive her mother. She knows that she's never getting her dad back, that he didn't get to go to her graduation. So I think that her thoughts are very compelling, and it shows you the job that Ms. Stillwell did raising a daughter who can be so thoughtful in the wake of tragedy such as this. As far as Ms. Stillwell's current situation, she's working full-time with a contractor for Hertz called Lois Lane. She's a quality control manager. This is an individual who has always worked full-time through her life, oftentimes in multiple jobs, and still managing time for charity work and taking care of her kids. As Ms. Dallas said, all of her kids graduated high school. So she's been an excellent mother. She has the ongoing charity work. Maya even indicated in her letter that she hopes that Tawanna can be there to attend and help with the organization of the fall 2023 event. In this situation, Ms. Stillwell acted under a strong provocation. We have the history of violence and abuse. We have the domestic violence from 2016. We have the gun held to her head late 2019, early 2020, prompting her to leave the house for a period of time out of sheer terror. And who wouldn't be terrified if a gun is placed to one's head? She was trying to leave the situation. She was just trying to get her stuff and leave, and he was keeping her from doing so. Now, we've already said there were alternatives that she could have taken. We're not going to pretend that there weren't. Bottom line, she was provoked. There are substantial grounds tending to not fully excuse, but explain or justify her conduct, not enough to rise to a defense, which is why we're here in the sentencing hearing. And with respect to that, Keane got physical. He was hitting her in the head. He was essentially restraining her in that he would not allow her to complete her objective, and it was not for any legitimate purpose. These were items that were boxed up, that were clearly her personal possessions to be taken. She called the police around 11 o'clock. So an hour before all of this happened. She did try to do the right thing. So while she obviously did not take every step, or again, we wouldn't be here, she did take a number of steps to try to alleviate the situation. Going to the prior events when she had been strangled at her birthday party. That was in May of 2020. So yes, it was about 6 months previously, but I would, as one who's not been strangled in my life, I think that it would be a memorable event. As one who's never had a gun placed to my head, I also believe that that would be a memorable event. And I think that those would certainly be on her mind to some extent when this occurred. Her conduct was induced and facilitated by Keane. He was intoxicated and he was the aggressor. He was acting in an intimidating and physically violent nature, one that was not unfamiliar to Ms. Stillwell. Now we go to her record. She has no history of conviction or delinquency as a minor. She's 47 years old. She's never had any conviction. In 2006, she had a minor drug charge. There's no suggestion in the public record that she's ever been a violent person. The only evidence of any violence that we've heard today that was specifically witnessed was the birthday incident. So there's no criminal record, no indication of violence, no indication of anger issues. And I would also note that she's been on pretrial bond conditions with GPS monitoring for 2 years and a day. Now, as far as the circumstances and whether this conduct is likely to occur again, this was a very specific domestic situation with a 7-year context in it. This wasn't her walking out.
1 second. Hey, Ms. Phipps, I'm gonna need you to stay quiet, okay? Thank you.
So the circumstances were very specific to the case. She had a 7-year relationship with this man that was fraught with difficulty, fraught with violence. And so there is nothing that would suggest that this is likely to occur again. It was a disproportionate reaction based upon the context of the events, the physical conduct and violence. It was not a random act. With respect to the character and attitudes of Ms. Stillwell, those all indicate that she is not likely to commit another crime. She's deeply remorseful. I'm not going to talk up her loss in this because we have a man who lost his life, but she lost her husband because of this incident. And I'm sure that she will talk about this, but while she did in the moment what she thought was necessary, she immediately regretted it. And she misses him every day. She thinks about him every day. She thinks about all the good times that they had, because in 7 years they had many, many good memories, but they had a handful of bad ones too, and this one was the worst. It shattered the generally happy family structure that she had, and they were able to keep their problems largely hidden from the world in order to successfully raise a family. As far as her likelihood of compliance with respect to terms of probation, if probation were ordered, and she spent 202 days So 6 months, 21 days incarcerated. And when she ultimately bonded out, it was June 8th of 2022. So 2021, excuse me. So 2 years and a day, essentially, from today. She's had no violations. She's had no failures to appear. She's been flawless with respect to the pretrial bond conditions. She's unlikely to reoffend because it's a one-off act. This was specific context. It was a personal relationship. Your Honor, what we're asking in this case, and I know it's a big ask, but I think that it is just in this matter, given the full context of events, given the evidence that you've heard, given the fact that Ms. Stillwell admitted to everything from day one. From day one, it's been, he put his hands on me, I shot him, that's what happened. Then we dig deeper, we get the context, we get the domestic history. Keane is lost. There is nothing we can do about that. Everyone knows that. And again, my deepest sympathy to his family and to his loved ones. And again, he had some wonderful qualities. I do not doubt that. Ms. Stillwell could talk about them. But he's not coming back, unfortunately. We don't believe that a period of incarceration with the Department of Corrections is beneficial either to the state, public safety, or to Ms. Stillwell. We believe that a probation term, given the time that she has already served, which is nearly 7 months incarcerated, she spent 2 years on pretrial bond conditions. Your Honor, we're asking for 5 years of probation. We're asking for 240 hours of community service work to be performed within 18 months. And any other treatment or counseling as recommended from the court. I know that had this not been a fatal case, family violence intervention, that would be a program that would likely be recommended. So we're not opposed to any of that. Your Honor, we're asking for mercy from the court because this was a tough situation that involved a disproportionate reaction to provocation. Ms. Stillwell did not set out for this evening to become fatal. She tried to avoid it. She called the police. She tried to do the right thing. Unfortunately, she didn't quite do enough of the right thing. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Ms. Stillwell, if there's anything you want to share, now would be the time to do it in the same way that members of Mr. O'Kelley's family had a right to be heard, and I did hear them. I heard from Ms. Phipps and her grieving and ongoing pain, as well as Ms. Brown and what she's been through. You have a right to be heard since you are the defendant in this case. So if there's something you want to share with me, now is the time.
Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize because I did assume that you had already looked at the reports and pictures and everything away about the confusion about the gun, because I just assumed that you read.
Don't have to apologize. That's probably a natural assumption, but judges aren't supposed to dive deep into the facts of the case unless they're presented in court, because as you have learned, there are often two sides to a story. And so I know what we've talked about in earlier hearings in this case, and only what I read in the letters that were submitted, and then what I've heard today.
Okay. I would like to start off saying I wish none of this never would have happened. Like, this have just been up from the last 2 years. Like, I haven't been able to sleep. Like, this not just like somebody on the street. Like, this my husband. Like, we had good times, bad times. I tried to do everything. Like, I don't know how to fix it. I tried to pay for the funeral because I had got locked up, and then I got right back out the next day. And then for the aggravated, so I got out the next day. So while I was out, I still was with the family, with Miss Field, because I felt like that's my grandmama. We all like family. It's not like it's combined. We all family. So I tried to pay for the funeral. I tried to even come to the funeral. I was not allowed to do any of that, but me and Miss Phipps was trying to work together with the funeral for me to pay for the funeral. And then also, like, my daughter, like, I'm grieving too. Like, my daughter having a hard, rough time with this. Like my daughter haven't even been around her dad. So she thought looked at Keon as her dad. That's how close we was. Keon was like her dad. So she misses him as well. She grieving too. It's hard on my family because he came to our events as well as it's hard on my husband's family as well. Like, I just feel real bad. I feel like I let my kids down, but mainly my daughter, because my daughter was like, Mama, don't go over there. And I just went anyway, because I was trying to do the right thing. Like, I was just like, just go talk to my son. But then I went. But anyway, I'm going to hold myself accountable. So I just went anyway, because that's me. I just believed in him. I was trying to help, like, for him to do better, and just wanted to listen to see how things was going to go. But at the end of the day, though, I just really feel that I let my daughter down. She hurt, and she had to spend 6 months away from me. And it was just like, really like just me and her, because that's my only daughter. So now she bouncing around to house to house to house to house. I don't know who house she at, where she at. Every like different month, somebody else will have my daughter. She'll go to another house. So that's hard. I hate that I had to put that on her. That was a lot as a child to deal with. Not only that, I'm sorry for his family, which my mother-in-law, like everybody, we was all close. We had just left for like my breast cancer walk 3 days before that. All of us was together. Mainly his grandmama. It's not just like he was there to take care of her. I was there as well. We spent holidays, everything. Like, I feel like my heart just crushed because of that. Like, she was my grandmama. Like, and I know she looked at me as I was her granddaughter, because I was on her life insurance plans to help her figure out her funeral. Me and Keon supposed to do the funeral together, take care of her. I'm blessed to see that she up can walk as today, because I'm supposed to been there for her. I love her. Like, that was my grandmama too. So I don't know, even when like my life, me going to jail, that was bad for me. I never been in no trouble having to go to jail, sleep on the floor on a little bitty mat with 5 people, going from a king size bed to this, having to deal with this. There's a lot on my mental. I was having anxiety attacks every single day. Like, blood pressure went up. Like, it was a lot for me to go from having all this to God had to humble me to realize I could lose it all to end up here. So in 4 weeks, I was just able, the nurses kept coming to get me, that diagnosed me with PTSD. And they came and got me and took me to the other 5 months. I went to a program called, it's where you get your life back together if you have a second opportunity, a second chance. It's called New Beginnings. My counselor was called Mr. Watson. And in those classes, it's really a good program, because I went through anger management. They even helped me, like, they got people come out for like cosmetology classes. I got my CPR, like learn how to save a human life or baby life. It just teach you. I went to, when I say anger management, domestic violence classes. Even for people who don't have a GED, haven't graduated, they give you a GED. They taught me how to just know your worth, how to avoid conflict, like as far as take accountability for things. Like, jail wasn't a good place, but I'm grateful for that program, because if I wouldn't have went to that program, I would have, even if I had another chance, I would have still doing the same thing, because I would have been like, he taught me this. What ever stayed on to that counselor said, when a person show you who they is, that's who they are. It's me. I keep giving everybody accountability. I want people to do good. I believe in people more than they believe in themselves. Nobody never told me, oh, that I'm gonna fix myself. They never said that. I wanted them to fix their self, but they never told me they was gonna do good. But I thought that. So, now I learned to, like, I'm just not gonna give nobody no more other chances to, like, do none of this. I try and avoid all conflict. I just learn now to, like, I can't give no more chance of opportunity, because this right here, me keep believing in somebody else who don't believe in themselves, trying to help somebody who don't want to help themselves. That caused me, my whole life, my family, it caused so much destruction and chaos by me keep trying to help somebody else get their life together. Even me and his grandmama tried to get him counseling. She cried. We both cry all the time. Get counseling. Go see somebody for him for help. But me loving his grandmama, I tried to
help for what?
like, as far as like the alcohol, because he was like real bad on alcohol. Once he drink, he really is a good guy. But once he started drinking, it's like he'll turn into somebody else, a whole nother different character, a whole nother different person. And he got so much anger built inside him. And that's where that come in at. So I really stayed there a lot and really just wanted him to get help and believe him in a lot of stuff. And a lot of stuff I just hid because I have records and stuff that as far as he was on my medical insurance. And I tried so much to really, I know I turned it into my lawyer, but basically saying he was sick. And I never did tell the family. I just stood there for him to try and help me. But I believe that was to help him. But I believe that's where I went wrong at. But at the end of the day, when I went to jail, I really do appreciate that class, that New Beginning program, because it did help me. So when the judge let me out, then I was able to just try and get everything together. I avoid conflict. You could see I never been late. I had my ankle monitor on. I've been on curfew for like 2 years. I check in once a week, never missed a check-in within 2.5 years. The judge, he let me go out of town. I didn't violate that. The motions that Tessa put in, like 4 or 5 of them, everyone that opportunity that the judge gave me, I never violated. He changed my curfew time from 9 to 11, and he said, Ms. Stillwell, don't be playing around in these streets, or you're gonna be right back in jail and violate your bond. And I didn't. My curfew at 11, I'd be in the house still at 9 because I was so used to being in the house at 9. And then when I went out of town, go out of town with my job, I still do the right thing because I'm grateful. Like I stay away from all conflict. I learned my lesson. Like you can do one bad thing and it just have an effect. One bad choice will have an effect on everybody. It just didn't affect me. It affect my family, his family. It affect the people who I'm towing on my back. I have a whole nonprofit. I go feed people like certain times. I go to certain areas, take lunches and stuff to the people at different spots at the stores. 2 of the homeless people got cancer. I have to take them to get their chemotherapy on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I have a lot, like the single parents that can't afford toys and stuff. I do toys for tots. So I work alongside with the mayor of Forest Park, Miss Angeline Butler. Soon you can check the records. As soon as I got out, they still supported me for the 2 years. I'm sure if she felt that I was a murderer, my character speaks for itself. She would not be working alongside of me with everybody in the community. And they even just ruined her name and say she was supporting a murderer. But she still gave me a chance and an opportunity though. And I'm grateful for all my opportunities and my chances. So I just asked for another chance to do the right thing to get things together. Because honestly, I want to never imagine myself to be right here today in this same spot. Never. I never even pictured that.
Okay.
It's all been a lot for me. The same way they haven't been able to sleep, I haven't been able to sleep. Like, I just hate to see my daughter crying and the rest of my kids going through all this. And when I break down, they be like, Mama, it's okay. But it feel like I let so many people down. There's so many broken hearts all over the floor, shattered. I normally be able to fix something. I don't even know how to fix it. I don't even know how to fix mine, to pick up my pieces. Because that was my husband. I love that man. I love that man. That's it.
That's it? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
All right.
You can go back
Thank
with
you.
Mr. Marks. Hello, Ms. Willingham.
Hi, Judge.
Is there anything that the state wants to add to its presentation?
I'm going to let, since Ms. Washington, she already presented, I'm going to let her go ahead and finish.
That's fine.
Yes, Your Honor. Just based off of all the evidence presented, the state is requesting that the court sentence the defendant to 20 with 10 years to serve. This is a more than reasonable and fair recommendation, reducing the murder to voluntary manslaughter. And also to remember, with everything that has been presented to the court today, to remember the victim in this case, Mr. O'Kelley, instead of the defendant who stated that she had to go from a king-size bed to sleeping with 5 people in a cell. The victim in this case, as the court has heard, did call 911 at 11:28 p.m. 30 minutes later, we know that he is shot, and for the next 5 days, he's fighting for his life. The defendant in this case did not call 911 after she shot him, even though she did have the opportunity to make a call to 911 prior to the shooting. In fact, as the court has heard, the defendant went to her car and she hid the gun there. As the state previously stated when we were reciting the facts, when Officer Reyes asked the defendant where the murder weapon was, she initially pointed to the kitchen and she directed officers to the kitchen. Defense stated that she had the gun in a box, pulled it out of a box that was in the kitchen. In fact, Officer Reyes then followed the defendant to her vehicle. And at that point, she showed officers the gun that was in her vehicle. And that's where the gun was located and that's where the gun was found. Furthermore, the defendant did not have any visible injuries, even though she stated that she was being beat by the victim prior to the shooting. There were no injuries that were documented, no photos were taken of her. And in the report, no injuries were visible on the defendant. Your Honor, this does not seem like a typical case for self-defense in light of the actions taken from the defendant after the shooting. This is a more than reasonable offer, and you've heard from the victim's family in this case, and unfortunately, you cannot hear from the victim. So we are asking that the defendant be held accountable and that the court sentence her to 20 with 10 years to serve, with the balance to be served on probation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marks, anything else on behalf of Ms. Stillwell? And you don't, I followed everything you said, so you don't need to repeat any of it. And normally I would have stopped after Ms. Stillwell shared what she shared, but Ms. Willingham's closer to the facts of the case and she was able to join Ms. Washington. So I wanted to make sure the state had a full opportunity to share what it wanted to share. So if there's something you want to add, as in new or different, I'm happy to hear that.
Your Honor, we'll stand by our prior remarks.
Okay. Ms. Stillwell, I think the image that you gave me that resonates most, and I appreciate that I'm distant to all this. I'm meeting some of you for the first time. Sadly, I'm not distant to the concept of loss. There are far too many deaths that we have to deal with in this courthouse. It's the image of all the shattered hearts. And I think that's a fair description of what happened as a result of what you did. I think it's important to keep in mind that there was a loss for you as well. But of course, the ultimate loss is Mr. O'Kelley. He's not sleeping in any bed now. Big, small, on the ground, king size. And his loss is a community loss. We've heard how it has affected his grandmother and his mother and his, I don't know how to describe it, adopted daughter, but your daughter that grew up with him. And I read her letter and she referred to him as her dad, her father. That loss can't be replaced. And what I struggle with is this notion of what was all just a mistake. Clearly, the state agrees with that because they have dropped the murder charge. It's not an intentional killing. But what we do have is someone who, when confronted by her abuser, also your husband, but I do believe that this night, November 2 on into 3, but it sounds like it was primarily November 2, 2020, wasn't the first time he'd put his hands on you in a way that you weren't asking for, in a way that was violent, in a way that was offensive. Where things really got out of hand was the way in which you responded. And so when Ms. Washington says it's not a case of self-defense, it would be a case of self-defense if you punched him in the nose and broke his nose because he was hitting you. That's self-defense. You're defending yourself. And I do believe you were defending yourself that night from an unwanted aggression from Mr. O'Kelley. And Mr. Marks has had to delicately circle around this, it's the proportionality of your response. And it's what we see in society all too often. Someone brings a gun to a fist fight. Well, the result of that is someone's dead. I don't know, I don't believe, but I don't know, I wasn't there, that in your heart, when you pulled the trigger, you were thinking, I want you to die. You were probably thinking, I want you to back off. I want you to leave me alone. But you as an adult, and I'm told you were sober at the time, so I have to be thinking you were a sober adult at the time. You pointed a gun at your husband and you pulled the trigger, and you're not a 4-year-old. You know what happens when a trigger is pulled. A bullet comes out, and that bullet could have gone into his liver, could have gone wherever. It's remarkable that he lived as long as he did. But when you pulled that trigger, you made a very fateful decision that has a series of consequences that you don't get to walk away from. Even if 98% of the rest of your life, you were doing good deeds for friends and family, and the breast cancer awareness walk, and helping take care of folks in need. You yourself said, and Mr. Marks emphasized it, that Mr. O'Kelley 98% of the time was a A-OK guy, but there were some dark sides to him, and there were consequences of that. It sounds like it was something that left a mark with Ms. Dallas, and she didn't need to be around him after she saw him put his hands on you in a way that is not acceptable. But you escalated things by grabbing that gun. In Georgia, you're not required to retreat if someone is attacking you, but you do need to be measured in the force you use in response to what happened. And your introduction of a gun and pulling the trigger of that gun moved this from the self-defense of hitting back, pushing back, hitting them over the head with the box that was there, to using deadly force. And that's why we're in this realm of consequences. I do believe that you regret what happened. I think that's clear. But it doesn't bring Mr. O'Kelley back. It doesn't heal the wounds that were caused, and it certainly doesn't piece together all those shattered hearts, yours, your daughters, Ms. Phipps, Ms. Brown's, and all the others who knew and cared about Mr. O'Kelley. I do think that I need to incorporate into my decision the fact that before this, you really had never been in trouble. And since this, you've done well, although you had every incentive in the world to do well once you were out on bond, because whatever judge that was made real clear what would happen if you didn't. But it's a good sign. And frankly, I don't worry too much that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're going to read that Ms. Stillwell's robbing a bank or anything like that. I don't know that I agree with Mr. Marks that this was so situational that it would never happen again. I worry that we fast forward and you're in a relationship and it's a relationship that becomes toxic at some point. I don't know what you'll do if the other person treats you the wrong way. You, like I said, are entitled to do certain things if someone is treating you the wrong way. But you went from 0 to 60 and it was deadly when that happened. We don't need to clarify it, but there's something about a machine gun, not a machine gun. You had time to talk to me about what happened, and I didn't hear you say anything about he was threatening me with a machine gun that night. So there are pieces of what happened that including Mr. O'Kelley calling, saying, hey, you need to get here to get her out of here, that make it sound to me that it might have been a little bit of a two-way tumultuous evening. But that really doesn't matter in the end. In the end, you shot and ultimately killed Mr. O'Kelley, and that's what we need to work through. The state has dismissed counts 2 through 4 in the indictment and reduced count 1, murder, to voluntary manslaughter. Ms. Stillwell, I find that a reasonable and appropriate sentence that incorporates the good that I've heard, and there's a lot of good that I've heard, the bad that occurred. You killed your husband in a way that your lawyers, I think, have begun to explain to you wasn't sufficiently justified, that you ought to go to trial or file an immunity motion and have a judge decide, wait a minute, you shouldn't even be prosecuted. It's murkier than that. And so going to trial carried pretty serious risk. A jury could, with a little more work by law enforcement in this case and hearing more from a medical examiner, decide that it was not a justified killing. You'd be sentenced to life, and that would be a very different situation. So I appreciate the state's reasonable approach. That may have frustrated Ms. Phipps and Ms. Brown and Mr. O'Kelley's family members to a certain extent, but I think given what the state would be able to prove if this went forward, given the hand they were dealt by the work law enforcement did back in November of 2020, this is a reasonable outcome to have us dealing with voluntary manslaughter. Ms. Stillwell, I'm going to sentence you to a term of 10 years, 3 of which you will serve in custody and 7 of which you will serve on probation. I'm not going to require you to take a family violence intervention program course because it sounds like you already took a number of classes to that effect while you were in custody. You will get credit for the time that you did serve. You will have additional custodial time based on the sentence that I imposed. This is a sentence for which you are eligible for parole. And given your criminal history and how you've done so far, it seems like that's something that the Board of Pardons and Paroles will consider. To Ms. Phipps and Ms. Brown and other members of Mr. O'Kelley's family, you may leave here today saying justice wasn't done. Nothing I say today was going to bring Mr. O'Kelley back. A wrong was done to you and your family, and you've lost a son and a grandson, and however else you're connected to Mr. O'Kelley. What I struggle with is a point Mr. Marks made, which is, do we do more good in our community by saying, well, now, Ms. Stillwell, you need to be incarcerated for years and years and years and years. And for those with a thirst for vengeance, that might feel good. That's not what the justice system is about entirely. There is punishment, and I think that's what the 3 years are. It's punishment. It's not rehabilitation. Ms. Stillwell is working and taking care of people who depend on her. But on one fateful night, she did the opposite of taking care of someone who was not taking care of her on that night. But this sentence, in my eyes, and that's where this case is left, strikes a balance where we recognize that a grievous wrong occurred and a life was taken, and you took that life. But it was in circumstances that are different from many of the cases I see where there's no justification. It's a stranger who walks up and says, give me your stuff. And the person says no, and there's a gun to the head and they pull the trigger and someone dies. That's not this case by miles. But it still is a case that's fraught with loss and that has consequences. It's not just a mistake, but it's a fatal mistake. So that's the sentence that I'm going to impose. Ms. Stillwell, Mr. Marks may be about to say, hey, could Ms. Stillwell turn herself in later? I'll listen to that, but I'm going to tell you my going in answer is I'm reluctant to do that because I worry about you and what you're going to do. But let me say this, and then I'll hear from Mr. Marks and I'll hear from Ms. Washington on this. So you hear it first. The sentence right now is 10 years to serve 3 years. If I agree to a very short time in which you can get your affairs in order and turn yourself in, if you do not show up on that date and at that time, your sentence will be 20 years to serve 10. It will be exactly what the state asked for. That'll be the sentence I sign. You'll be a fugitive. They will find you. They always do. You will have bought yourself 7 more years in prison by not showing up on the date and time we agree in the very near future.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Marks.
Yes, Your Honor. We're asking for a 14-day turn-in date. Ms. Stillwell, fully employed. We'd like her to have an opportunity to communicate with her employer. Her daughter will be going off to college in a little over a month, have 2 weeks with her to say her goodbyes, get her affairs in order. 2 years and a day she's been on pretrial bond. She knows the consequences. There's no chance that she isn't appearing on time. And I think that you've made it abundantly clear the consequences for it. So given the length of time that she's been on probation, her consistency with it, it's been flawless. We're asking for 14 days. Thank you.
Ms. Washington,
Judge, and if I may, I'll step
Ms.
in on this
Willingham.
part, because I was here for the prior setting. And at that time, Ms. Stillwell was told then that it wasn't likely. When we both reached out to your office to try and get this scheduled for a final plea, the reason that it was set so far out was to give Ms. Stillwell that time. So I feel like that was already taken into consideration. I think that an additional 14 days is, and I recognize the court's decision, and I just believe that to allow Ms. Stillwell to stay out for an additional 14 days would just be adding insult to injury for the family, especially considering, as mentioned, and I don't know whether it has been mentioned, but Ms. Phipps was here at the last setting. And at that setting, Ms. Stillwell knew that this day was coming. She knew that we were going to ask for a new setting date so that she would have time to get her affairs in order. And if she hasn't gotten her affairs in order at this point, I do not know the date exactly, but I do know that it was at least a month or two ago when we were last present. That's well over 14 days. I don't know what more she would need to do at this point.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there's always more before you have to turn yourself in. But it's a point well taken. I had forgotten some of the previous exchange, and some of that may have been well with my staff. Lots of things happen very suddenly in life. Mr. O'Kelley getting shot was very sudden, and then his passing was sudden. We heard from Ms. Phipps that she was at home expecting to go to church when she got the call saying, you need to come now to the hospital because things have taken a turn for the worse. Ms. Stillwell, I am going to have you go into custody now, and I will fill out the necessary paperwork so that the sentence is in effect, but I'm going to ask you to go with these two deputies. Thank you.
Your Honor, may I approach with the plea paperwork to sign as well as the...
Yes, and exhibits, and we'll make those part of the record.
You would pull the statement.
No, don't worry. I got that. Thank you.
Down, Judge.
One last thing, Mr. Marks, is it all right? Would you authorize my team to sign the indictment on your behalf, indicating Ms. Stillwell's guilty plea?
Yes.
Ms. Stillwell, may we sign for you?
Yes.
Thank you. And Ms. Washington?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I've got one other request. Ms. Stillwell, you can talk with Ms. Stillwell in lockup if you guys need to talk more, but I need her to step out.
Okay.
I'm going to ask, and I'll rely, maybe, was it Ms. Ramos? I'm not remembering. Santos. Sorry, Ms. Santos. I got the last two letters right. If you could help Ms. Phipps, Ms. Brown, and others who are here on behalf of Mr. O'Kelley to leave. They don't have to leave right now. They may want to talk with the prosecutor, or we could flip it around. And Mr. Mark, I just want the two groups to leave at a different time. And one of the deputies will help too. They're just, I'll defer to you all. I need everyone to stay seated for a sec, and we're just going to figure out, is it Mr. O'Kelley's family and friends who are going to leave first, or will it be folks who are here for Ms. Stillwell?
Judge, I would probably ask that that we hold back, just because I know that
They may have questions and want to talk with you.
that, as well as I know that Ms. Phipps' mobility.
I know that too. I got to have Ms. Phipps come up to the table. So why don't we have them stay put? And I'll ask the friends and supporters of Ms. Stillwell to head on out. If you'll just follow the deputy's direction.
And Your Honor, is the record showing 202 days of credit?
Let me tell you. And she's entitled to all of it. So if it's 203, it'll be 203. I don't know. $205.
205, perfect, even better. Thank you,
Okay.
Your Honor.
All right.